Now to a story that you won't have heard about at all today. The media didn't cover it. I'd love to think it's because they feel the shame, but I rather think it's because they simply do not care. But here at Sky, we do things differently. In the Western Australian Upper House, some amendments were put forward which would mean that babies born alive after an abortion would be rendered care. Now, you'd think this would not even be a question in any civil society, and yet these amendments were voted down 25 to 6 votes. How anyone can think this is anything but cold-blooded murder is certainly beyond me. We were talking at the top of a show, how can a 13-year-old know whether murder is not murder or not? There can be no confusion that once these little fighters make it to the other side, that is a born baby there, and they deserve any much as help as any single one of us. I just can't believe this story. I literally am in disbelief. What does it say about us as a society that we treat our own progeny with such contempt, especially when we know, if you want to put the moral and ethical arguments aside, if you possibly can, but we know that the adoption waiting list in this country is longer than the Nile. They are desperate. They are desperate for babies. So it's not like, oh, what do we do if no one claims this baby? You've got lined up loving families desperate for a child. Why wouldn't you let this child live?
The abortion subject is obviously very hot, right? But babies born alive after a failed abortion is not a pro-life or a pro-choice issue. This should be the common ground amongst both sides, that once a baby is born, I mean, even if it's unwanted, even if its death is inevitable, it's now a breathing person right in front of you who deserves every right that every other living, breathing person has. It's quite extraordinary that our politicians would not say that baby deserves medical care and we ought to keep statistics on these babies, as they have done in Victoria and Queensland, the only two states that do keep the stats. In the 10-year period between 2010 and 2020, 724 babies were born alive after failed abortions. And West Australia is saying, well, effectively, so what? We don't need to render any sort of care at all for these children.
It just seems extraordinary, doesn't it? And you mentioned adoption, Liz. I mean, there's something like fewer than 300 children every year are adopted in this country. How is that even real? I mean, there are so many children out there, whether they be in the foster system or they're surrendered at birth, who are just floating around out there hoping for someone to love them. You've got a child that's born after a failed abortion and, you know, we say, OK, we understand that the mother doesn't want it. We'll find a home for you. We'll find a life for you. No. We'll just leave you there on the table to cark it. I mean, it's the same as saying if you've got terminal cancer, why would we bother giving you any kind of treatment? Because we know you're going to die anyway.
Well,
like, you're just a cost to the public.
Some people are going to make that. Some people are going to make that argument, right? Because a lot of these babies invariably do die. Most of them, you know, probably only live half an hour or so. But even for that half an hour, doesn't human dignity and decency say that baby, for those precious few minutes that baby is alive, that baby should receive palliative care? I mean, we do that for an old person. Why wouldn't we do it for a baby?
It plays into this, like, unspeakably horrific concept that a life is the value that others place on it, that you're not inherently valuable. If I don't want you, you're nothing. You're not worth keeping alive, which, as we know, is wrong. And we would never say that about an adult or anyone with any sort of disabilities, etc., and so on. It's only the most helpful, smallest among us, I mean, helpless, smallest among us, that get treated in such a horrific way.